The air was sharp enough to sting the skin. Frost clung to the branches of spruce and pine like silver dust, and the forest held its breath beneath the pale light of dawn. A faint wind carried the sound of a river under ice, whispering as though it remembered warmer days. The land was silent, untouched by time. And in that stillness, a single figure moved through the snow. His name was Elias Boone, a frontier woodsman, a man who had spent more years beneath open skies than under any roof. His coat was worn to the color of bark, his boots cracked from endless miles, and his breath steamed in the cold air like smoke from an invisible fire. In these mountains, around the year 1823, the world belonged to the elements. And for men like Elias, survival depended on one thing above all others: the ability to make fire. He stopped at the edge of a frozen stream, scanning the timberline for shelter. The sun had not yet cleared the ridges, and the temperature hovered far below freezing. He had hunted through the night, following the faint tracks of elk, but hunger had forced him to turn back. His hands were stiff, his canteen half-iced. He needed warmth. Not later, not soon, now. For on the frontier, cold could kill faster than hunger ever could. Elias found a hollow beneath a fallen pine where the wind could not cut so deep. He knelt, brushed snow aside, and gathered a handful of dead needles and bark. His movements were slow but deliberate, as though each gesture had been practiced 1,000 times. In truth, it had. The knowledge of firemaking had been passed to him not by books or teachers, but by the whispers of older men, trappers, native hunters, and wanderers who had learned from the land itself. Long before steel was forged or flint was struck, fire had been born from the patience of hands and the breath of man. He reached into his pouch and withdrew a small piece of blackened cloth and a worn steel striker. These tools had crossed the continent with him. The charred cloth had been made from cotton, burned slowly in a tin to create a perfect ember catcher. The steel, cold, heavy, and curved like a crescent moon, had been hammered by a blacksmith in St. Louis years before. Elias also carried a shard of gray stone, smooth along one edge. It was flint, gathered from a riverbed somewhere near the Missouri, where the old traders said the best sparks came from stones that had tasted water. He worked with quiet focus. From the ground, he lifted a clump of dry moss and shredded it between his fingers. The smell of earth and resin filled the air. Bits of pine bark joined it, and a few curls of grass he'd tucked away in his pack. He built the nest carefully, cupping it in his hands like something living. Then, with a steady motion, he struck the steel against the flint. A brief flash of orange leapt into the cold, then vanished. He struck again, and again. Sparks flew, hissing in the air, but none caught the tinder. His hands, already numb, shook slightly. The moss was damp from melted snow. He tried drying it near his breath, but it stayed cold and heavy. The sun climbed higher, and the cold seemed to deepen instead of fade. Hours passed. The forest creaked and moaned in the wind. Elias's fingers were stiff, his face pale beneath the frost. He knew that panic was a killer in these conditions. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast, he reminded himself, words spoken long ago by an old crow hunter who had once shown him how to make fire from nothing but sticks. Elias's eyes searched the forest floor for something better. Under a dead log, he found a patch of dry inner bark, curled tight like paper. Perfect. He tore it loose, tucking it into his coat for warmth. When he returned to his small camp, he built a new tinder bundle: dry bark, powdered moss, shreds of the char cloth in the center. His lips moved silently as he worked, whispering a rhythm known to all who have ever fought against the cold. Strike, spark, breathe, believe. He struck the steel once more. The spark fell, dim at first, then brighter. It landed squarely on the cloth. He leaned close, his breath a thin wisp of steam, and whispered to it as if it could hear him. The ember brightened, eating through the black cloth. Smoke curled up, faint but alive. With both hands, Elias lifted the tinder bundle, cradling it gently. He breathed into it, slow and steady, feeding the ember with life. Smoke thickened, gray turning to white. Then, with a sudden bloom of light, flame. The fire flared and snapped, and a wave of warmth spilled across his face. Elias smiled, not the grin of victory, but the quiet relief of survival. In the wilderness, even the smallest flame could feel like a miracle. He fed it carefully, adding thin slivers of pine, twigs, and finally thicker wood. The fire grew, its glow reflecting in his eyes. The sound was beautiful: soft crackles, the hiss of melting frost, the sigh of wind retreating. For the first time that morning, the air smelled of life: pine smoke, sap, and earth. Elias warmed his hands over the flames, the skin red and trembling as the feeling returned. He knew that the hardest part was over. The frontier had tested him again, and once more, patience had answered. As he sat before the fire, he thought of those who had come before him. Ancient peoples who had built flames in the same way, in the same silence. Long before rifles and axes, men and women had survived with only their hands and the wisdom of nature. The Blackfoot, he remembered, carried embers in dried fungus, glowing for miles on the trail so they could start a new fire without losing time. The Shoshone used the hand drill, spinning a stick between their palms until smoke rose from dust. The Crow had passed down a lesson that Elias never forgot: fire does not belong to man, it is borrowed from the earth. He understood that now more than ever. Each spark was a fragile bargain between life and death, warmth and frost, faith and doubt. He stared into the flames and saw reflections of all those who had depended on fire to survive. The settlers crossing the plains, the trappers along the rivers, the native families gathered in winter lodges. Fire had always been the silent companion of humanity, following wherever they went. The light faded toward afternoon. Elias sat quietly, feeding the fire until it burned steady, a pillar of orange in the gray forest. His strength returned with the warmth, but so did his sense of reverence. This was not just a skill, it was a heritage, carried across centuries of hands and hearts. He watched the smoke twist upward through the bare trees, rising toward a sky turning pale gold. Somewhere in that smoke was gratitude, the unspoken thanks of a man who had earned, for another day, his place in the wilderness. As the camera lingered on the glow of the fire, the sound of the wind softened, replaced by the low murmur of the river beneath its crust of ice. Elias's face was calm now, the strain of the morning replaced by peace. He leaned back against the pine trunk, his breath mingling with the smoke, and for a long while, he simply watched the flames dance. The narrator's voice would have spoken softly over the final image: every fire begins not with flame, but with faith. In the silence of the wilderness, it is that faith, and the patience to try again, that keeps a man alive. The smoke drifted upward, curling into the gray sky, and the scene slowly faded to black, carrying the warmth of Elias's hard-won fire into the next story, where skill becomes mastery, and flame becomes craft.